Good afternoon, colleagues. We're just waiting for members of the panel to join. And I'm going to hand over to Mr. Allan Zinn, the Director of the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy, who will lead us through this session. Thanks.
Okay, Prof. Prof. Keat, you are there. I understand you are going to kick us off.
Yes, and of course, thank you, to everybody and to CANRAD and participants. There's been a great feast, and we're not done yet. So we'll see where this takes us as well. So Christy and Allan and the team, and of course, humanities faculty and my own division, thank you very much for this. Colleagues, so as you would know, and you will see that I just have to glance from time to time to my screen here for my prepared notes. My apologies for that. Didn't want to take chances. The event of the conference also coincided with the 10-year anniversary of CANRAD, but also the 10-year anniversary of Allan as the director of CANRAD, actually the first director for 2 terms. So he may or may not be leaving. We don't know what that future holds for us, but we just thought that it may be appropriate to acknowledge the work that Allan has been doing for the past 10 years in the CANRAD space. He has been tasked with a huge mandate in 2010 when he took up the post in March. I can remember some of those very interesting beginning years and how Allan invested his energies in putting the architecture of CANRAD together and getting the programmatic work in place at the time. Of course, as you would know, just given our own country's history, that we aspire to drive the project of non-racialism and put a huge and appropriate intellectual spin to the study of democracy as well, both in our own country, nationally and internationally. And apart from that, of course, the university has relied so much. If you look at the history of our university, you would know that was, just a few years after the merger of the historically, apartheid structures that came together into what was that time called the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. So CANRAD and the outfit was a strategic project for the university to affirm its new, identity on this path, and moving into the university and assisting the university on its new road. And he had to drive so many expectations from the university governance council, from the vice chancellor, the management structures, and of course to bring together the different sets of expectations within the university, both through research, advocacy work, and of course the other interventions. And so CANRAD has certainly, developed within both the national and international consciousness as a key outfit for our university, and also playing into the global challenges that the planet is facing, and on different ways, of course, advancing the scholarship, especially critical scholarship on racism, non-racialism, and democracy. So it is very, when I thought, this would be a great opportunity with Christy to say a few words, it's not easy, so there is a kind of a lack of the linguistic capacities, to present, what Allan has been doing at the university, but his leadership has been amazing, and the way he has pulled together different, structures and systems across the country has been outstanding. His commitment to social justice activism, historically, his dedication to the university, to the CANRAD itself, to the community at large. His firm orientation towards partnerships and networks, his alignment with youth development, superb steering of CANRAD as well, and of course a masterly contribution to the university as a sector and society in general. Okay, but that would be the cluster of all those contributions is for another time. But as some of my younger colleagues always reminds me, especially those who are very fond of working with Allan, is that Allan is cut from a particular historical cloth, which we should never fail to acknowledge in the context of the broader freedoms we are enjoying today, despite our country and the globe's many, many challenges. So, having to deal with the widespread expectations, of course, Allan has steered CANRAD in such beautiful directions. And of course, that Tabang is also joining us. He has been very key with some of the other colleagues on Wabo, Christy joining as well. And so that space has been critical, in the university's imagination of itself. And CANRAD has always had, some of the most amazing management and review reports, always on point, reflecting flexible and efficient management, but also productive scholarship. But more importantly, I think, is the idea, that Allan has instilled in the broader social project of CANRAD, and that is to produce and generate, on a continuous basis, the critical hope that one requires for the democracy and non-racialism project. So Allan, so from our side, and I speak on behalf of the university now, many thanks, and of course, also on behalf of the staff of CANRAD, a zillion thank yous, all the young people and others who have gone through the process of CANRAD, and your collaborations across Gqeberha, the metro, the province, the country, the continent, and beyond. So thank you so much for this. And with that, colleagues, I will close, so that Allan, in his own conversation with Tabang, can reflect on CANRAD the past decade. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andre. I mean, I never, expected this. Really, really kind words. As you know, I do feel that it's important in terms of, what you even call it, that there's a time and a place, and I think it was a lovely fit in the period that I was. I feel it's important that CANRAD gets younger leadership. I think it's important, So I'm hoping that there's going to be a good appointment sometime soon, and of course that person is going to have all my my support in terms of transitioning. But thank you to you and the university for for enabling one to live out one's life, yes, for the cause, able to kind of transition a little bit from civil society work to academic work and to straddle it. So thank you for that. I think that I see Tabang back in the house now. So Tabang, we are now in your hands. And okay.
Thank you very much, Allan, and much appreciation to Professor Andre Kiat, who is the Nelson Mandela University Deputy Vice Chancellor for engagement and transformation. Thank you so much, Prof, with those very insightful thoughts as a form of opening and welcoming remarks. Without much ado from my side, I will then allow Allan to give us some reflections on the theme of the day, 10 years of CANRAD's community building. And subsequent to that, we'll be having, we'll call upon group of young scholars who will intersect with that input by giving us some reflections of their experiences in working at the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy. And then obviously we will have a chat room where people can raise comments and questions. And thereafter we will be having a closing remarks. Thank you. Over to you, Allan.
Thank you, Tabang. And it's quite interesting that Andre's, as he spoke about, the period and the context of CANRAD, that was where I also started. Mine is going to be a very short reflection, basically a couple of talking points rather than a formal paper academic exposition. So good afternoon, everybody, and glad that you're in the house in this final closing plenary. I was moved, I remain moved by Prof. William Gumede's notion of interconnected differences. He used that term, and how we still need to build a common identity based on democracy, in the country. It reminded me of some work that we've been doing on the unresolved national question in the country, which we face. Now, the context is very important in terms of what you do, why you do, and when you do. And as Prof. Kiert has said, if we look back to CANRAD, we've got to just look a little bit earlier in 2008, where you had some disturbing racist videos that emerged at the Free State University, where some students had actually abused some of the workers there. And in the aftermath of that, there was an inquiry, a governmental inquiry that became subsequently known in the report, known as the Zinn report, and that looked at issues of discrimination in with regard to so-called race and gender amongst others, and it was at that point that the VC then at what was then NMMU, the Metropolitan was still part of the naming. That is Prof. Swartz. He led a march on the campus, and then he indicated that you would want to imagine a center such as CANRAD, and so that in fact did happen. That context was part of the impetus for the formation of CANRAD. I say part of it because, of course, Swartz was a political, and as part of the UDF, and there was a re-racialization happening in the country, and so he was bringing some of that thinking as well into the space. But also the university had just undergone what is called a 5-year higher education review, and the review found a very fractured culture. The institutional sort of culture was very fractured because we had come out of the old UPE, the Port Elizabeth, the university, the Technicon, and also Vista at the Missionville campus. And so here you had a new VC, and you had some of these difficulties. And one of the tasks was that that CANRAD had to work on the institutional sort of culture at the university. And in fact, that problem of the institutional culture was number 2 in one of 3 of the apex sort of priorities at the university. So after some piloting work was done in the Faculty of Education in 2009, we moved as CANRAD to manage a process at university formally from 2013 to 17 around what is called the institutional culture in enlivening process, ICEP. And we got Ilse Olkers in, and she was heading this team of people inside the university, a couple of people outside as the facilitators, and we worked very kind of conscientiously with layers at the university, starting with the senior executive, including the VC and the deans, and then heads of department, directors, and then any member of staff who wanted to get involved. And this is both on the academic front and what is called pass front at the university. And that served us well. One of the weaknesses was that we only involved the students late in the process. I would say at the end of 2015 only. But be that as it may, there is a book now out of that, what VC Swartz called an experiment, that we had tried and trialed this. And so there's an ICEP book available, and it feels like, not that we've come full circle, but that there's some progress actually, because I understand and I know that we have a chapter in a book that is called Achieving Nelson Mandela University. And this book is going to be published, I think, in the first quarter of 2022. And it will be, I'm really looking forward to that book in terms of giving us an overview picture of that period, from the merger into this new era where we went from the UPE, Technicon, Vista, NMMU to the NMU. Okay. Now, this, of course, was an attempt to build community inside of the university. And there was a movement towards a deeper understanding of community engagement. And this, of course, is a work in progress completely from 2010 onwards. I would say one of the biggest difficulties that we've had is the spatial or the geographical divide at the university. I'm doing in the metro, and I think we have to consult, Janet. Janet Cherry has done a piece of work on Corsten, for example, and we must read this. And in fact, there was somebody who did a master's thesis at Rhodes University and found that this metro was the second most divided metro racially, spatially in the country. And so we come into this notion of trying to work and build community with that in mind. But you mustn't also forget that we have a campus in George. And this campus, if those of you who've been there, is the most beautiful campus in the country, but it literally sits in the mountains, far away from human habitation. In fact, I think the baboons there have viewed us humans as the invaders or the colonizers in that space there. And so we've had a situation where many people in the metro and there in George had never set foot on the university campus. And we always had inquiries. How much do we have to pay, to come to the event? And so on principle, all CANRAD events were declared open and free to the citizens of the metro and where we worked. And it didn't matter what it was, whether it was a dialogue, a conference, a colloquium, anything. And I think that was vital. at that point in time, in the 2010 sort of period. However, this stance was only possible because of the committed senior leadership at Mandela, ensuring that there was funding for this project. And this was during a period where engagement was really an unfunded mandate. Whereas today we have a DVC, engagement and transformation, at the university. And I do hope that adequate funding is going to be given to this important arm of work. Now, one of the strategies that we used as CANRAD was what I called, dialogic engagement. And this was vital in terms of us getting people to listen to each other. And so you can call it from the difficult dialogues in 2010, and I recall one of the first being a topic called the massification of education. And it was quite robust, I would say. To the annual, the Palestine-Israel sort of dialogues that we have in the what is called Israel Apartheid Week that we have annually. And this is part of the boycott, sanctions, divestment campaign. And this is important international, work, the work in solidarity in terms of the freedoms of the people of Palestine. It attracted many students and a few committed lecturers at the university. And I do hope going forward that we can do much more on this front. The community dialogues that we held, some huge, with over 1,000 people in the Feather Market Hall around elections, to the medium-sized community dialogues in New Brighton at the Jebe Hall. I still think about it as the centenary Great Hall, where we had the statues must fall dialogue, to the red location museum, to the South End museum, into Galvindale at the community center, to the Chatty Hall, to the Uitenhage Hall, the town hall there. Hotels even in Central were used as venues, but most often actually the Mission Vale campus, because we found it to be reasonably central in terms of people being able to access from Motherwell, Uitenhage, from this side of the metro, etc., etc. Now, there were even an important series of what I call smaller community dialogues. This was less. We tried to keep it less than 50 people, and these were held on the Mission Vale campus. And I recall, particularly a education series where the participants, these were now teachers, learners, parents, NGOs, community activists, were invited in, and we used what was known as the fish bowl format. And some of this, of course, still needs to be written up in a proper way. There are resources in the resource center. There are over 200 DVDs. There's some work waiting to be translated, and the board of CANRAD has said, "Hey, when are you going to translate some of that work into outputs?" And I think that is something that is on the agenda. Now, these various community dialogues organized from 2011 and still running today would not have been possible without the solid partnership that we have with the Herald newspaper in the metro. Generally, around 6 of these dialogues were kind of held annually And I know that the next one that we have is going to be on the elections, which are coming. Now, the institutional culture enlivening process also introduced us to this concept of a courageous conversation, which was also utilized inside the university in terms of getting people into spaces really across huge divides. Okay, I think enough said about that. I'm going to comment just that I was brought up on a strong diet of economic, determinism. Let's call it that. And I learned so much over time to appreciate a deep and strong intersectional outlook, on struggle and democracy. And I want to thank the interns, the young people in the office. I want to thank the academics with whom we got involved, people across the university and nationally, for helping one to expand on this deeper sort of understanding of democracy. We also, in 2012, we started programming around gender education at the university. And we were very fortunate to host a Carnegie Fellow. How do we get rid of the sexist language? I don't know this fellow story. Now, Mumbi Mwangi, she was with us for just over 3 months, but she provided a great impetus for deeper, broader, university-wide possibility that we've later saw come, to fruition. But some of that groundwork was so vital, I would say. Now, I also have to thank Enver Motala for introducing and starting to expand and expound on the scholarship of engagement, and to how we had to organically link our engagement and the research work. And this was despite a very small staff complement. Some of the fruits of these labors have resulted in both formal DHET and more what I call, community-oriented, occasional, publications. And you can see some of that in the last 2 pages of the conference program. Another important strand or modus operandi that we employed in terms of our community engagement is to involve the arts and culture unit at the university. In our, sometimes I call it hard, and very sort of political programming. Fortunately, we had Michael Barry and his team, and that competent team were open to finding us the right fit in terms of poets and musicians, organizing visual sort of art, artist plays. And this was most, sort of rewarding, and I think helped to break down sometimes this view, about politics, actually. And you must remember, we were working with people at the university from the old UPE and that, where politics was outlawed, where I think they only managed to get an SRC in the 1990s after the new sort of, new South Africa, the political South Africa came into being. Now, unfortunately, there were other forays, I would call it, into areas of community development and engagement, but it had much more mixed sort of results. And so I'm just going to comment that, for example, in sport, we tried to revive school sport. We even had an annual fun run or walk, which was called the human race. And this was held at various venues, mostly around the Mandela Bay, the stadium, but also in Uitenhage, Kariga now, as well as on the various campuses. We've also done work in schools, important work through and with entities like UNACO, like NABDI, like the Love Life, and that is important because, of course, as we're trying to, of course, always bridge these civil sort of society, school, that sort of nexus. We tried. We were conveners actually of what is called the Anti-Racist Network in Higher Education. That is ANI from 2010. And it was a very important work that brought people nationally, 12 of the universities at least, sort of together, and an important initiative with very, committed education cadres, I would call them. However, this was eventually overtaken, I would say, by the fees must fall movement and moment that actually ushered in new ways of mobilizing on the campuses, on the campuses. Our work in the anti-racist network in the higher education answer is ongoing, but really in reality, the CANRAD Foundation remains the backbone of this civil sort of society initiative, and it's not easy. As I move to closure, I'm just going to note that CANRAD has essentially been working out of the university sorts of values, as at that time in quarters called Vision 2020, and now, of course, called Vision 2030. And that is where the work into, sometimes was an Africa Week, sometimes an Africa Month. There's a diversity month, bringing all kinds of faculties and entities across the country together. And we also try to straddle the town and gown by organizing what are called the university institutional public lectures, kind of elevating the thought by iconic figures in this country, people who contributed to freedom. I'm also, when I reflect, I think about the numerous book launches, probably around 8 to 10 annually, until COVID-19 hit us, and then once we had to go onto the virtual sort of platform, we had to cut down on that. Now there are many people in community organizations, entities, others that have not had time to highlight in this very short overview. So please do excuse me. I want to say that there's this aphorism saying that an organization is only as good as its people. And CANRAD has been most fortunate in actually having had committed staff, and I include here the over 20 sort of interns that we have had since 2010. We've also had what I would term friends of CANRAD, both inside and outside the university, and they have effectively, kind of extended the reach of the university into the metro. I want to thank them. I want to thank these people, the internal, external, etc., etc. Now I'm going to ask, there's one slide or a set of quotes that I want to pull up, because we now have a sort of decade later, we have, and maybe I can just appeal to Hesti, I think, to help me there with that slide. The VC Mutwa And Bruce Diamonds are now managing the hubs of convergence, where we're finding a deeper outlook in terms of what I would call community sort of building, and and vision 2020. So we see here in this quote, the hubs of convergence will endeavor to co-create physical spaces where the university meets the community to engage on common platforms and find solutions to problems that affect our immediate communities. And this was Mutua coming into office in 2018. Can we have a look at the next one? And then again, I want you to read closely. The hubs of convergence offers the opportunity of experimenting with how best to converge the space of existence and life of the university and society. It provides options for transdisciplinary collaboration, which will enable the university to give effect to its vision, mission, and strategic sort of priorities, and to recreate itself in service of society. And then lastly, I think there's one more. That's a bit small, but hopefully you can make it a little bit bigger. And so yes, just to say that the university is trying. It means the university should work in partnership with all sectors that play a role in the community and its sort of development. Okay, so I'm sharing that with you to show that the kind of straddle now from 2010 to where we are now, and we've definitely come a long way. And yeah, I think I'm wishing Prof Keat and the ETP and CANRAD well as we move into this new decade of engagement and the building of community. I think I'm going to stop there, Tabang. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much, Allan, for such a very moving input. Trying to kind of bring a thread connecting all of the different components and segments of the interventions that CANRAD has been able to make over the years, particularly, bringing the nexus between university partnership and the communities in the metro. We wish you all the best, as you transition now towards another milestone of your development towards your retirement. Colleagues, there are few comments on the chat room, and from time to time, I will just bring them in so that we can just, reflect on them, because there's a specific reason why we invited people to make the comments on the chat room. We have Simpiwe Dada on the chat room, who also reflected on some of the partnerships between CANRAD and the NGO sector. Kanyisa is the NGO which is doing work on the peri-urban settlement and farm workers. He also commented that they benefited a lot through being linked to other university-based structures, progressive academics within the university, and some of the material and the debates they have enhanced in the work that they are doing in the organization. Also, we have Christy, who also congratulated CANRAD, particularly the director, for the work that he has been doing in pursuing the Herald Nelson Mandela University Community Dialogues successfully. We are now going to invite a group of young scholars Shumelo Nopo is one of them, who has worked as the first student assistant at the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism. I have beautiful recollections as well of working very closely with him. We also have Boiketo Mowato, who also worked as an intern at the university. We also have Sam Baino. We also have Pedro Mzileni, who also did a great deal of contribution to the work of the center as a student intern. We also have Balindi. These are a group of young scholars. They are not emergent scholars, because I always problematize that, because these are fully fledged scholars in their own right. We will also be looking at how being at CANRAD has facilitated or enhanced one's career development. So they will each, introduce themselves and then give us their own reflection of the impact that the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism has had on their own, career path in their lives. I will then allow Allan to make some few comments. Come in, Allan.
Yeah, thank you, Tabang. I do know that, Glumelo, who is at the UKZN Center on Race, that he's actually involved in a workshop at the moment. So he has told me that he won't be able to make it. I'm not sure about the others. I'm not sure if they've been able to make it, at short notice, because I do understand that they were only asked quite late, by the team. Okay, all right.
All right. No, thanks for that, Allan.
You first.
We will then have Ubalindi, who will, give us some of her, reflection in terms of her own experiences of working at the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and the impact, the center has had on one's life. And then after that, I think we do have Sam Bainon, who will also give her own inputs. Then can I hand over to you, Balindi?
Thank you, Tabang. Good afternoon to everyone. I am Balindi Ho, and I was the very first intern on the George campus. And while we opened the doors for the first time in 2017, working hand in hand with the CANRAD team. Just to give a brief background on the events that led us up to opening those offices in George campus. It was in 2016 when Mr. Allan Zinn was invited by the VC to come and help us, the students, and to mediate between us and the members of management as we were struggling to have conversations or even come to a conclusion or a feasible solution regarding the issues that we had as students. And when Mr. Zinn arrived, he was very helpful. And when we learned of what he does and what CANRAD does as a whole, we were very keen on having an office of our own. So in 2017, it was made possible that we open the doors to the satellite office that we have there in George campus. Working at CANRAD has been great. It has provided me with opportunities, and even it has provided me with opportunities to work with great people, to meet people I would have never otherwise have met, and also just to spear ahead the visions that we had as the student body, and also visions that I personally am very much passionate about. These include things such as women empowerment, gender-based violence issues, non-racialism, of course, as it is initiated in our name. And that non-racialism especially was a big thing in George campus, because George campus was previously a white-only campus, Sarsfield College. And when we moved from that to being NMMU, back in the day, there was still a lot of factors that affected students that did not quite change or were not quite integrated into the new state that we were in. So the students were struggling, and I had been a student leader before in the SRC. I'm serving as treasurer, and I was very much aware of these challenges that the students were facing. So coming into the space of CANRAD, I was offered a space where I could have these conversations with management, have the support that I needed, both financially and otherwise, and the backing of the office in Gqeberha that allowed us to have them calmly, respectfully, and in a safe space. The other thing that was, the other highlights that I had was the book clubs that we had with Prof. Sasanti. It was African intellectualism, mediation. We played as a big mediator between student leaders and the leadership at the time of the university, which was also key so that there was a merger between the two. Moving swiftly along to my education and how CANRAD has played an impact on that. Coming into the university space, I really thought I would be an accountant. I enrolled to do a BCom accounting, but soon after I was enlightened into politics and also my CANRAD space, I realized that working with people and trying to change the world is really what I'm passionate about. And now I'm completing my BCom in economics, hoping next year. I've applied to major in public economics, trying to impact the lives of people, especially those who are less fortunate and those who are affected by our political past, and trying to help transform or be a catalyst in helping the change happen. Currently, I am working as an educator for history in a local no-fee-paying high school, where I get the opportunity to impact the lives of young students and also teach them on, even though that their circumstances are not favorable, however, they can still make a great difference, quoting the leaders that we had back then, and also the impact that normal people, ordinary people that were driven have been able to have over the years. I'd like to congratulate CANRAD on this 10 years of excellent touching lives and also changing our society, and Mr. Zinn on his milestone, and also wish him a happy retirement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Balindi, for such beautiful inputs. And I can highlight one of the things that you just mentioned, that you are celebrating the 10 years of CANRAD's touching lives. That's very poignant, to touch people's lives in a very transformative, ways. It's such a phenomenal, work. And I'm now handing over to Sam Bainon. I'm not quite sure if Sam is still on standby. Over to you, Sam.
Hi.
Hello, Sam.
Hi,
welcome. Welcome to the session.
Hi, thank you so much, Butabang, and good afternoon to Prof and to everyone. Let me just say everyone on the platform. It's good to be here. Butabang, please watch me with my 4 minutes because that's what it needs to be. So hi everyone, my name is Sam. I worked at CANRAD in 2015. And I worked as a community engagement and student liaison at the center. And my role placed a strong emphasis on conceptualizing and organizing and facilitating community and student engagement programs together with other team members. I recall Brother Tabang, Butsonwabo, Spokazi, my student peer, as well as some of the research projects we did as one way to deepen democracy, but I think also profile issues of today's society and of students, I think, which was relevant at the time that I served there, because I served at CANRAD at the height of the Feast Must Fall movement. And so it was interesting to have to wear multiple hats, in that I was a student intern and employee basically for the institution. And I was also a student, an intersectional activist. And I think for me, one of the questions that I got in preparation for this was, what are some of the moments you recall at your time? And I think for me, that was one of many. I think the fact that the CANRAD SMT, of course, which included Mr. Zinn and so on and co, the fact that you would all release us as student interns and allow us to go and help, co-propel the student movement forward, instead of kind of use administrative processes to erase our voices and stifle our association with the movement and our expression, I think for me will always stand out. I think it was an example of, taking on a more humanizing approach in the space. And that's really scarce in the context, I think, of, social political tensions and unrest. So that really stood out for me. And also just to mention just one or two other things because of time, I think, universities and centers such as CANRAD really ought not to be, spaces of intolerance, privilege, conformism, censorship, and that if they do become that, we ought to be quite concerned. Instead, I feel that, centers like these have to create spaces for conscientious debate, and as Mr. Zinn mentioned earlier on, uncomfortable conversations. And I think that's something that also stood out for me, in terms of my own experience and time at CANRAD, is that we created spaces for sometimes really difficult conversations, but they were always necessary and important, and I think propelled action in certain spaces within the institution, and more importantly, I think within the broader community of the Nelson Mandela Bay. And I think that's key. I mean, Mr. Zinn, you mentioned ISEP and that re-enlivening process, and that's something that definitely stood out to me at my time in terms of transforming institutional culture. But what I would say is how the experience has also prepared me for my own role right now. Very briefly, I work in the legislative sector at the moment, more specifically in a provincial legislature. I'm not a politician, I'm not a public rep anymore. I transitioned to being a civil servant, a public official, and I'm charged with public engagement now, or public involvement as it's termed in the 6th Parliament. And so I've taken a lot of the principles and values and a lot of the experiences and lessons and approaches and strategies and techniques, that I developed as a result of my time at CANRAD into the space. And I think that's quite key when we contextualize the legislative sector as it stands right now. We've inherited, a colonial, westernized system of practicing public involvement, and I think that that's something that, fresh critical minds that emerge from spaces like CANRAD ought to be concerned with in the sector, so that we kind of reimagine public involvement processes that allow people to really shape, governance in the country, be it in a municipality, in a province, or even, in public participation processes initiated by Parliament. So I don't want to go through everything I wrote down. I wrote about 3 pages of my experiences and some of the lessons I've took, but in a nutshell, I think that's what I would contribute to the discussion. And I just really want to wish Mr. Zinn all the very best and thank him for his mentorship and his leadership during my own time within the space. All these years later on, I still carry a lot of those lessons with me, and also just congratulate CANRAD. I think it is an example of how we can really transform public engagement in our different roles and spaces. And I think it speaks to the broader question of democracy, which is quite fragile at the moment, I think, in our country. And so, yeah, just keep up the good work of taking democracy to the people and making people part of democratic processes. Yeah, I'll leave it at that, brother. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sam. What I can highlight from Sam's input is how dialogic engagement has opened up spaces for criticality where students were able to come, to terms with their own sense of agency and power, and as critical agents, and also providing a sphere where the unconditional freedom to question and assert the centrality of purpose, which the university is actually is commissioned for, and also to even question democracy itself. So thank you so much, Sam, for those inputs. I'm also informed that Boiketlo will be joining us via WhatsApp. So the technical team will advise in terms of how do we bring Boiketlo in at this stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. She is ready.
Oh, hello, Boiketlo. Welcome to the session.
Thank you very much.
It's good to have you.
Thank you for having me. I just have some computer challenges, but thank you for having me. Good afternoon to everyone on the platform. So my name is Wikesha Mwato. I was an intern at CANRAD in the year 2014. So what I've put down as one of my major highlights was being involved in the formation of the Gender Forum, which I believe was a precursor to some of the bigger initiatives that have happened in the university in the gender space. I got to meet some very interesting scholars, very insightful conversations and engagements. Even as a result, I went on to write my master's in the field of gender, so it was really an inspirational experience for me. If I were to go on perhaps to preparation in terms of my career, so I'd say that certainly CANRAD was instrumental in raising that awareness about South African history and issues and politics, a gap that many of us have experienced in our curriculum and education in South Africa. So it was very instrumental for me in that sense. It just started with that initial consciousness, and as a social scientist, it assisted by putting social science into practice for me, because I began to understand a role that social sciences play in tackling social issues, and it allowed me to begin to place myself as a social scientist in the working world, and I began to see the opportunities that can come about. So currently I'm working in diplomacy. Of course, it's politics nevertheless, even though global politics are not necessarily local, but I think CANRAD was very instrumental in laying the foundations to my career, which I'll forever be grateful to. I remember the times I worked alongside Shumelo in the same year. So I remember the times with Tabang and Funabo and Allan. It was lovely. So thank you very much. And I echo the sentiments of the people who've spoken on the panel in congratulating CANRAD and Allan on this big milestone. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wiketlo. Your input has invoked some beautiful memories, when we were still working together on a research project. I think it was in 2014 and 2015, where we were doing a research survey, looking into students' framings of non-racialism and notions of democracy, and how that research project contributed, immensely, in different ways to our own, academic scholarship as well. And also how other interns that came in to join, such as Samantha Benon, who were able to take up, that project forward as well. So thank you so much, Boiketlo. Now I think I am inviting Pedro Mzileni. I will be advised also if Pedro is ready to join in. Over to you, Pedro.
I don't to see you. I don't see Pedro online, so perhaps we can move to the next speaker until he joins us. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you, Christy. We then invite, I think we have concluded that piece where we were, bringing in student experiences of their work at the center. I'm now opening the session, to some of the comments. We also have a comment from our VC, Professor Sibongile Mutwa, who also, commended CANRAD for having been exemplary in its practical expression of an idea of an engaged university and advancing equalizing modes of community and university relationships. It has laid a solid ground and foundation for our aspiration as placed, anchored institution. She also congratulated Allan and the team, for the tremendous work they have done and for mentoring, the young scholars. We also have a comment from Rodney Busart, who also reflected on some of the community engagement partnerships that CANRAD has, marshaled over the years. We also have Olwam Mwazi, who also congratulated Allan on the work that he has been doing, over the years. We also have, Olivia also reminded us that, some of the reflection of the paper by the former VC, Professor Derek Swart, is also available on the link as provided on the chat room as well. I think now coming to the announcement session. Allan, are there any specific announcements? I'm aware that we are hosting this event at a very, significant time in this month where we are celebrating the Biko month.
Okay, Tabang, firstly, I would say thank you to for the warm sort of comments the chat room, VC, Sampiwe, Rochelle, the editor of the Herald, and Olwam. And then, of course, Belindy and Sam, thank you so much for coming on. I know it was very short notice that you were asked to come on just to come and say a few words. Yes, no, I think, Tabang, if it's possible, I'll ask you to make the announcements, any announcements, and then I think I'm just going to take 1 minute just to close the conference off. Okay, so I'll pass
Go for
over
it.
to you. No, I'll pass over to you to make the announcements.
Oh, the announcement.
Yeah.
We are having one announcement, Allan. So I'm hoping that you will remind me that the Steve Biko lecture, the annual Steve Biko lecture, which is hosted by the university in collaboration with the Azanian People's Organization, will be held on Sunday. Can you please remind us of the specific time, Allan, as well?
It's at 1 o'clock.
At 1 o'clock.
At 1 o'clock.
Great.
Yes.
And the speaker for this year's theme, can you also remind us, Allan, who will be the speaker?
Yes, we've got Professor Harry Nengwebekulu. He was a sort of confidant of Biko's, and he was banned at the same time, and then he had to leave to go into exile. He went to Botswana. So he's going to be the main speaker, and then Prof Kondlo is going to be the respondent. He's at the UJ. So yeah, no, it's a lovely lineup, and of course we have our own poetic soul in the form of Leleto, who is going to render some cultural sort of items on the day. So that's, hopefully people are able to come in on Sunday, as it's the last day of the big Biko week that we have. I see there's some comment there by Christy. Tabang, perhaps you can ask some of the current interns and postdocs to speak. I'm not sure if they're able to speak. It's difficult to speak. Can they speak, Christy? I'm not sure if it's possible, but
yes.
Okay. We still do have a bit of time, Christy. If they are able to join, they can join in as well. Just to give us some of their reflection.
Yes, I'm just thinking that we've got our current team of interns and postdocs also online. So, and we've got some time left, another 20 or so minutes. So perhaps if the technical team can bring Lesego and Mark and Olutubi on to the stage, it would be good to share some of their reflections and insights as well. And I'm just thinking of Rodney Busacht, of course, as a long-term employee at CANRAD. Rodney, perhaps you want to say a few words as well. So if our technical team can bring Rodney Busacht on, I think that would be wonderful to also hear some of their reflections on their time here at CANRAD.
Oh, lovely. If that is feasible from the technical advisory team, I think we would welcome them just for a few minutes each, let's say 2 to 3 minutes each. And then we will go on and hand over to Allan for the closing remarks. Over to you. Over to you, Lesego.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lesego, and I have been the research intern at CANRAD for about 8 months now. And I always speak about this with one of the postdoc, Dr. Olutubi, about how CANRAD is really the space that allows for certain conversations to happen, allows for certain questioning, and allows for just certain initiatives to happen. This conference, right? Some of the topics that were part of the conference, some of the abstracts that were there, some of the presentations that we saw are really transformational. And to be in a space like that, to be part of a group, to be part of a team, working with Mr. Allan has been an experience that I couldn't have fathomed, and so I'm just really grateful to be part of it. And as CANRAD celebrates its 10-year anniversary, and seeing all of the interns that came before me is truly amazing, and to hear about the work, the projects they were part of, and what has CANRAD done for them. So I'm truly grateful for that, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Lesego, for those insightful reflections. Over to you, Pedro.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, good afternoon, rather, to everyone who has joined us. The Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy, for me, was actually where I began everything. You know, I remember I arrived at this university in 2013, and there was a conference hosted, I think, in 2013, and I attended as a first year at the time. I remember that's where I met Mr. Allan Zinn, that's why I met Mr. Thabang Quench, Mr. Stearman. I also met Professor Andre Kitt in that conference, and a number of colleagues that I'm familiar with. And I think from 2013 up until maybe at least last year, I always had the same introduction when I raise my hand to make a comment or to ask a question. So I became familiar with CANRAD because the CANRAD provided engagement spaces out of the classroom that provided what I would call an intellectual freedom. So you, in the CANRAD spaces, you're not confined to the expected questions or inputs as much that are so constrained as you would find in a classroom. So CANRAD provided this first platform on the university margins, if I would say, where we were free to engage with a number of scholars, a number of community activists, and so on. And what came out strongly for me at the time was the space of engagement in the university was not only limited to professors. It was open-ended to numerous activists, people ordinarily that you wouldn't associate with the university before. And then towards the end of my undergraduate studies, going into postgrad, I got introduced into the activities of doing research, and that's where now working inside the center, and it developed my research management skills, the process of writing for applications, writing for my postgraduate qualifications. It basically anchored my trajectory in being a young academic. So when I look at myself and my journey in the center and also in the university broadly, because I believe even though CANRAD is this specific center, but it also paved the way for the opening of a number of other centers and research chairs in the institution. So it sort of created this breakthrough for this, vibrant intellectual community now that we have in Nelson Mandela University today. So transitioning therefore throughout the university community over the years for me up to where I am today, I would say I am one of the products that have been produced by Nelson Mandela through and through. From right at the beginning as a raw product to the person I am today, I cannot tell my story outside the role that Nelson Mandela University has played, outside the role that CANRAD has played, outside the role that Chris Shet has played, the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, and a number of colleagues in the institution our students, our middle managers, the executive leadership of this institution. There are a number of colleagues that I could mention who have played a role in this ecosystem of building this intellectual basket that we have in this university. And for sure, for future endeavors, the work ahead is going to be elevated from here. I'm positive about that. Us being named Nelson Mandela University should make us commit to the project of building an unracial South Africa. We must never give up on that project, the project of social justice, the project of non-racialism, building our democratic South Africa to be what was envisioned by our forebears. And that is the role that we personally, and also my own comrades as young people, scholars, are going to commit to as we go out there to be ambassadors of this university. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, Pedro. I have, a vivid recollection of some of the beautiful work that Pedro spearheaded whilst he was still a student intern at CANRAD, a platform that was known as Buwa Mfundi, which was, one of Pedro's pet project, and he, successfully, led that project, and how it has, made an impact in the academic space, more particularly among the students, in the form of, raising a critical consciousness among the students. So yeah, thank you so much, Pedro. Do we, Christy, have on your side another person who would like also to give a brief reflection?
I can see Mark, and I can see
Mark. Okay.
Olutobi also. So one of them can go.
Let's start with Mark, and then Olutobi will follow then. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. I must confess I wasn't expecting to be called upon, so I have taken off all my formal conference clothing and am deep into my weekend clothing. So my apologies for that. I think I probably hold the position of having the strangest experience of CANRAD because it has been the most distant because of COVID-19. I heard in early February of 2020 that my position at CANRAD was formalized and that I would be starting on the 1st of March. And of course, we know 2-3 short weeks thereafter, we were on our level 5 lockdown for COVID-19 and have remained in some form of a lockdown since then. As a result, it meant that my engagement with colleagues was entirely digital. And I'm still in a position where I have people who I call colleagues and I call friends who I've actually never met in person from my time at CANRAD. The two things that have struck me the most, I mean, obviously there's the intellectual endeavor of CANRAD, which has been a multidisciplinary open space where ideas and sometimes fairly controversial and difficult topics can be tossed around and engaged and thought through. And that is, of course, vital. What I also think of, though, when I think about CANRAD is how the space has been kind of curated. And in seeking out a postdoctoral fellowship in 2019, I was speaking with one of my current co-host, Glenn Holtzman, who's an old friend, and he sent me to the CANRAD website, and I looked at the website and I thought, now this is a place where I feel really I could be at home. This is a place where my research and my interests really could find a fertile ground. That was my first kind of impression. And I think definitely one of my lasting impressions of CANRAD is also that in December of last year, we had a farewell, like an end of year party. And obviously me being in Cape Town and stuck here because of COVID, I had to join virtually. And I was couriered a care package from Allan of various sorts of eats and drink so that I would feel like I was a part of this farewell party, even though I was a few hundred kilometers down in Cape Town. And this speaks to a kind of leadership that understands the importance of collegiality. We as academics we work in lonely spaces. We're isolated. We read, we write, we do these things that are very individualistic and very lonely, and where intellectual collegiality is not only important but prioritized, that it's actively sought out, is, to my mind, one of the key aspects of creating interesting and cutting-edge scholarship. And I will forever cherish that notion. And it is a very, very important aspect, to my mind, of creating this kind of an environment. So those are my thoughts.
Oh, thank you, Mark. A salient point, I take from Mark's input is how he has seen CANRAD as a home for his academic and intellectual pursuit within the university space. So thank you for that, Mark. And the strange relationship you have with CANRAD, under the COVID-19 conditions. I'm now handing over to Olitobi. I think Olitobi will be our last. Over to you, Olitobi. Then we hand over to Allan for the closing remarks.
Okay, thank you so much, Thabang. And yes, I'm happy to be called upon to also share some thoughts about my time at CANRAD so far. And without mincing words, it's really been special. I mean, the more I look about it, the more I think about it, I'm just like, yeah, I mean, Simpiwe said something when he was asked to share some thoughts, and he said CANRAD is one of the best kept secrets in Nelson Mandela University, and I'm going to go with that. I mean, when he said that, I nodded deeply. I was like, yeah, I mean, yeah, there are many things that happens there that, I mean, you might think it happens everywhere. No, the leadership, the collegiality. I mean, we just had a conference. Look at how diverse, how interdisciplinary that was, and different persons from different perspectives. It does not happen everywhere, And I'm grateful to be part of something that is a platform that is larger than, myself, that brings different persons together. You bring people from the corporate world, from the political sphere, from the academic, from the community, and you have this rich programming. That after every webinar, I'm always just very grateful to be part of the team. Even when I'm just at the back end, I'm just listening in. You have a lot to think about and ponder on after these conversations, and it's just I'm grateful to be part of the team, especially in these times we find ourselves. Like Mark rightly said, it can be very lonely. Academics can be a very lonely journey. And even though I feel that in humanities and social sciences, it's much more lonely, because my colleagues in the natural sciences, for instance, they go to the lab, they meet colleagues, they are mixing chemicals, but you're just locked up in your own office trying to make sense of some semantic jargon here and there and things like that. So to have this kind of collegiality, it's something I'm really grateful for. When I came in, Allan was in Cape Town then. When I came in, he drove to see me then, even under lockdown, to give me a welcome package. Yeah, that was mind-blowing, Then when Prof was on board, we went for tea that evening. I mean, that's just that's phenomenal, completing a PhD, thinking about what next, and you're just in that big confusion. And then here you have this fantastic opportunities. Just it's awesome. It's the best kept secret, going by Simpiwe as well. Yeah. And so really thank you very much. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Olitobi.
Thabang, there is someone else on the platform here. Olivia, I see, has come onto the space. Yeah.
Yes. I just want to, highlight just one of Olitobi's input, that the contradictions, CANRAD being a monumental project, and how people have managed to keep it as a secret at the same time. So thank you for that, Olitobi. And now over to Olivia.
Hi, thanks, Thabang. So I think I'm probably CANRAD's most recent appointment made. It's been not even 2 months, and I was appointed mainly to help out with this conference. And in such a short time, I've learned so much, not only about the subjects that we were discussing, but also the people. And it is really magnificent. I sat in on one of our staff meetings, and it was amazing. Allan spent almost an hour just walking everyone through, giving everyone a moment in that space to say what they were feeling. It was in a very vulnerable time in our country, as it still is, but especially at that stage. And everyone had a moment to say something, and that's something that I really treasure. And I think also this closing plenary, it says a lot. This is the most people that have been on this stage during the whole conference. And Allan's name was on the slide, but you saw all of these different faces. And I think that says something about the way that he leads CANRAD. And I think that is really very, very special. It was lovely to see all of these different faces who've formed part of CANRAD throughout the years. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you also to Prof. van der Westhuizen for working so closely together and for bringing something magnificent to the South African and the international community. This was a lovely conference, and I think CANRAD did an amazing job, and I'm very honored to have been part of this process.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Olivia is one of the people who worked behind the scene to make this project a reality, this conference. So thanks to you, Olivia, for being part of that team. I think now we are closing. At this stage, okay. I think Allan should come in and give us the closing remarks.
Yes, no, I think it's thank you so much for mediating the last session. We are now at a point to close the conference. We've been interrogating notions of democracy, in South Africa, in Africa, and the world. I just want to say a warm thank you to various layers. I'm not going to mention names because there's so many, but to the participants, the speakers, the panelists, the moderators, to the wonderful audience who really posed good questions to provoke us, to our partners the Faculty of Humanities and the DVC Engagement and Transformation, to the many divisions and sectors at the university who had to work behind the scenes to make the week possible. Thank you. To the online platform operatives in the form of To Collaborate and the Remo and the platform. It held. Thank you. And then last but not least, our research team, and I'm going to ask them to see if they can come on again, headed by the tireless Professor Christie. May I ask them to just bring them, please, onto the platform. Christie, Olivia, Lesego, Olutubi, and Mark. I think that it was a wonderful opportunity to work with you. I think what I always felt, despite there sometimes being moments of difficulty, and there were many in terms of not only the whether the IT Wi-Fi is going to work properly or something or whatever, but I always had had confidence that Christy was going to pull through, and that was a nice feeling to have. That you can depend on your team. So thank you, Christy. I would say if I was a religious person, I would say, okay, now I hope that you're going to have. I'm wishing you the sleep of the blessed, tonight. But you may actually be needing more of a weekend, to rest. So thank you to everybody who's come on with us with the last platform, and a shout out, as I've heard about these programs now, to the VC for entrusting us with this mission at the university, and we hope that we have done you proud. So thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
so
Thank
much.
you very much.
It was wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Alan.
you very much,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thanks to the entire CANRAD team.
Thanks, everyone. Yes.